I'm Sean Pathasema. My title is the Director of Photography and Visual Resources. But since 2008, I've been the Digital Project Manager, so that's how I ended up working on this project, even though the title seems a little odd.
And I'm James Williams. I'm the Creative Director in our Communications Department. Having worked on the website and other digital initiatives, I'm a part of this project as well. So what we are presenting today is Smart Guide, which is an open access web-based interpretive system for in-gallery visitors that can also be used for virtual visitors as well. It's been designed to engage with as little friction as possible via familiar devices for the visitors. Phase one of the Smart Guide is a plugin for WordPress, which is going to be the bulk of our presentation. And the second phase is a sync functionality between our digital asset management system and WordPress that automates the creation of an online collection database that we're working to connect to the Smart Guide. We'll be covering our development process, the technical side of the system, and then the replicability of it for small to mid-sized institutions. Since we're saying it's for small to mid-sized institutions, we thought it's good to introduce you to the Birmingham Museum of Art. We're a municipal museum that's free to the public. And though we have 70 or so staff, we still feel somewhat small compared to peers like the Getty or Met, who have IT staffs that are larger than ours. And within that, we have an interdepartmental digital media working group that really is kind of an informal group that works on these projects, and that can range anywhere from 3 to 5 staff members depending on the project. And it's also, it's never a primary task, it's always a secondary hat for us to be wearing. So what we needed was to bring interpretation into the digital area, or digital age. And we were going to focus on in-gallery interpretation to replace audio guides, cell phone tours. We needed flexibility, we needed options for those implementations, and we needed to meet users where they are. And we're in the process of an open access initiative, so we wanted this to be as accessible as possible. So we also, of course, are facing limitations. There's the institutional inertia. Why would we need to do something other than text panels? It's what we've always done. Or public really loves audio guides. Do they really need digital interpretation? We, of course, are all working on limited budgets. In our case, most of our budgets are focused around exhibitions. So we had to carve out line items from other projects to try to work on this. And not having a dedicated budget really left us unable to really work on large or risky projects. So it had to be low overhead, but hopefully high reward. And of course, because we're short on staff, it's just always an issue for somebody to take on a task that's not their primary responsibility.
The next part is a little bit of history of how we got to this point. In 2012, we actually made a iOS app for an exhibition. We tried to use the IMA's TAP system, but couldn't quite make it work, so we ended up creating a custom front end for it, and then stuck with their XML format in the background. We designed the system for iPads only, and we checked out devices at the exhibition. Next step, we ended up wanting to do a general museum app because apps were kind of trendy and we needed one. So it covered visitor information, maps, exhibitions, and our collection. We initially set out to create another iOS app, but because of very tight budgetary constraints, we ended up deciding to kind of fall back and create a WordPress-based web application. This launched on WordPress 3.5. The compromise we had to make was a decent looking front end and really hard for us to use. And that was kind of a common thread across both these systems. Entering content in XML was not fun. The issues we ran into with both systems was supporting additional systems beyond what we already had. iOS updated constantly when we created the web app. WordPress did as well. So trying to keep up with just basic security updates and keeping apps working on current devices and operating systems was a challenge. We did like that the web application got us around the need to choose iOS or Android, but we called this thing an app, and our staff, our docents, everybody kept asking us, well, why can't I find it in the iTunes store? Which, yeah, it was just a little tough. With a web application, we do have the limitations of what the browser can access, so we're restricted from using the camera, accelerometer, and so on. This ended up being a good thing in the end because it kept us from chasing shiny objects and investing our time in technologies that may not have panned out. In 2016, we looked at updating this web application for kind of the modern age. We decided to bring it in as part of our main website. Our previous site, when we did the Arts BMA app, was Joomla-based, but we had moved our website to WordPress as well. We were given 20 iPad minis as part of this project by a donor, so we continued to check out devices, but we're encouraging people to use their own device. This also allowed us to use a single developer for a website and the application and a single server to support. And then the biggest hope we had was connecting the Smart Guide to our collection on our website, which we were in the process of building when we got to this stage. In the beginning of this year, we opened a contemporary exhibition that's running for 2 years, and that was the launch of what we're calling Smart Guide at this point. We wanted to focus on community voices, so it was mostly seen as an audio guide, but we had completely rebuilt this system. The launch, we got great feedback from our board of trustees, staff, and visitors. So it really created kind of a new wave of interest in bringing digital projects into our galleries. So, the system's built using standard web technologies. We feel that this keeps it accessible. Any modern web-based device can open this application, so it doesn't require downloads, it doesn't require registering for anything or having an app account and a credit card, so it's about as frictionless as we can feasibly make it.
So speaking to those warm, fuzzy parts, as a municipal institution, we feel a strong obligation to provide access to our collection as broadly as possible. And there's a non-cynical aspect of funding becoming easier when accessibility to limited access communities comes into play. And that's where you have to consider that accessibility isn't always restricted to physical or mental capacities, which a lot of people do. There are socioeconomic barriers to access, educational levels, and so on. And in that sense, we feel Smart Guide is accessible because there are no accounts. You can access it at school or home, iOS or Android, or Windows or Mac OS. We found within our constituency, a lot of schools in economic distress are implementing iOS or Android tablets because they're far cheaper. So to make it as broadly accessible as possible to us was a true accessibility issue. And then, of course, those low friction issues. If you don't have to download something when you're in the gallery, you're not waiting for something else. And it's not just another app that, you know, gets relegated to the 5th screen on your phone that you always forget about. We remind people in the galleries, you know, pretty regularly where to access it. So beyond that third space implementation, we've now carried it over to the rest of our permanent gallery spaces. And we've run it to over 100 stops now. We tend to try to keep things very small and digestible. And our driving point is that, you know, though this is kind of our technical discussion, content is keying. We've learned lessons before that we have to think about users first and the content they need. And you know, our content philosophy is really that the Smart Guide is like having a fun and knowledgeable friend with you at the museum. It's you know, some quick insights, maybe an anecdote, and hopefully without really realizing it, you've learned something about the work that generally isn't conveyed on a wall label. The tone is much more accessible, it's more down to earth. And we hope that the Smart Guide empowers people at any level of interest by keeping things, you know, in this short, condensed, and digestible format. We've also been expanding the platform. Since we've developed this back end, with each new project, we tend to try to create, you know, additional functionality. We recently reinstalled our Dutch galleries. There's this fantastic Vanitas that is full of symbolism and allegories, and we thought it would be a great test case for creating interactive images where you can click on a hotspot on the image. It loads additional content, and so far we've actually implemented this in gallery now in a kiosk using an iPad, and it's become one of the most popular stops according to our internal analytics. And further, you know, anecdotal evidence, just watching users in the gallery, they're drawn to, you know, a kiosk and an iPad. They start playing with it, they start learning more about the object, and then more often than not, they actually step away from the kiosk and walk up to the artwork to really engage with it and look at much more closely than they would if they didn't have that additional information about the symbolism. It's also because of how simple the back end of the system is, it's allowed us to be very responsive. We have an after-hour event that's a very casual, laid-back event. And the theme for it one week was summer camp. So our assistant curator of education, who does a lot of our content, quickly developed a scavenger hunt where users would go through the gallery trying to find Sasquatch. And if they found Sasquatch at the end, they could come back to the central lobby and earn a merit badge. She came up with this idea the day before the event. She was able to go to stops that already existed. And because she was very familiar with those stops, it just took a little bit more writing to link the stops together and why Sasquatch would be, you know, going to those locations. And all in all, there were 5 stops. It literally took less than 1 day for her to write the content and upload the videos. And then further, we wanted to try some case studies to see how this system could be implemented at other institutions. At the University of Alabama, Birmingham, they have the Abram Ingalls Institute for Visual Arts, which is a visual art gallery that serves the students of the university. They were having a David Sandlin exhibition. It just so happens Sandlin is in our third space exhibition, so it seemed like a very easy sell to try to collaborate with them. So we went over and in an afternoon, filmed quite a bit of video content, interviews with Sandlin, a lot of behind the scenes during the installation of the exhibition. Came back and in about a day again, put together the content into a Smart Guide stop, and it was ready for their opening. Really did highlight some issues that we had to think about for future implementation. AVA is incredibly small. Their staff might be 4 people. So it took a little bit more help from us to get them up and running. And because they're part of a large university system, their website is completely locked down, huge proprietary system. So if they were to implement the smart guide, they would either have to have a standalone WordPress installation that they would have to manage, or it's led us to think about setting our system up as a multi-page install so that we could host for smaller institutions. And then about the simplicity that I've referred to, it's the familiar WordPress dashboard that everybody's familiar with. Everything's very modular, it's drag and drop. We use the one proprietary piece of WordPress backend that we use is Advanced Custom Fields Pro, and we use that to create the content blocks, which that's where we enter the stop number, the featured image, text, links, audio content, video, and so on. And then we use the categories to organize the blocks. So if we need to have an index for a particular exhibition or a particular gallery, all we have to do is set a category and we can display those on a specific page. And so this is the smart guide in use. People using it on their devices. This is the kiosk we mentioned earlier. We've also added seated stations with iPads. Again, we're using iPads because we're familiar with them. We've been using them for a few years. So it's a good workflow for us. But if an institution were using another device, it should work just as well. So far the feedback's been really positive.
And this is the last step. We're calling it extra credit because WordPress does, Smart Guide does stand alone by itself without our collection database. We consider that kind of phase one, and phase two is connecting Smart Guide content with our collection database. That way, if you're on our main website and you search for an object, you can actually get to this content. So one of our general goals is to make content that we're creating last a little bit longer than, say, just the 3 months that we have an exhibition up. So that is in process. We should have that done very soon. And then the next step for us is also making the collection plugin available. So we happen to use TMS depiction to WordPress sync. That's not going to be mandatory, though. We're going to build in features to allow people to import, say, a CSV or other kind of data source for this system. Just a view of basically what it looks like. This, is basic for a lot of museums now, but it took us 8 years to get to this point. So it's part of an open access initiative for us to make our entire collection available. So it's a big deal for us.
And that was 8 years with no major grant support or anything else. We literally just cobbled together funds here and there as we could.
And this is our wrap up. We don't have it available right now. We hope to have Smart Guide available for this conference, but we'll have it up on GitHub by the end of the year. We think its strengths are that it's simple for content authors, so, it's just simple to basically morph it into your content goals. We're going to continue to adapt it, but, any WordPress developer should be able to kind of extend what it can do and how it formats. And there's, large WordPress community, so that's one of the other strengths. We've created a page on our website at artsbma.org/MCN2017. If you want to find some more information, we're inviting everybody to download it, try it, collaborate, including if you decide that it's not going to work for you, why that was, so we can kind of learn from all of this. We have the hunch that a lot of museums are all trying to do the same thing and all developing comparable products. So it would be nice if we could pull some resources as a community. have a few minutes for questions.
So we do have a few moments for questions. I neglected to mention earlier, if you're using Twitter, the hashtag for this session was MCN 2017-W8. You can see some of the comments that folks have made during the session. There was a question from Aaron. Are you still here? He was asking, I think you answered it, what platform app framework is used, and you mentioned that it's an open source WordPress plugin that'll be available on GitHub. Okay.
Vested interest since we're a vendor who provides platforms, but so can you explain why you didn't go down the path of using one of the existing sort of commercial platforms that publishes across multiple platforms?
Yeah, it's a funding issue for us. Our projects are driven by exhibitions. So when it gets to the point of in-gallery interpretation, it's small. So that's kind of the reason our history of the app falls the way that it did, is because we've slowly iterated on this design. We have never kind of gotten like a huge project to implement a commercial system.
Right. So what was the budget then for the technology side of things? No one wants to talk about money. Like what's small? Because we deal with a lot of small organizations that are like, we're $400 a year is expensive. If this is a $5,000 project or a $50,000 project or $150,000.
The initial version, the Arts BMA version that we did in 2013 or so, was $1,500.
And a large portion of the smart guide development that we haven't done has been part of a retainer agreement that's actually a retainer agreement for our website, because we could justify the expense of maintaining a website because it's one of our primary communication platforms. So we really managed to just kind of slowly carve a few hours here and there for the developer to meet our needs. So that's why I said it's been a very small piecemeal operation from the beginning. And now, I mean, the cost would literally just be the cost of a WordPress installation and hosting that server.
Do you have any lessons learned from choosing and using React since JavaScript frameworks move so fast? Is there any insight into that or lessons learned?
We use an outside developer for that side of things. So I really, yeah.
Well, then can I ask another one?
Okay.
How long have you worked with Fiction or used Fiction?
2 years.
Okay.
One in the back.
Can you say just a little bit more about the Fiction TMS integration?
Specifically about any aspect of it?
Strikes your fancy.
All right. I mean, we obviously purchased Fiction, so they handled the TMS to Fiction sync. I took on, as part of my other job, the sync from Fiction to our website. I wouldn't say that it was easy. While WordPress has moved in the direction of becoming better for enterprise, it's still not expecting to suddenly get 30,000 images. So it was a challenge for us. We've gotten it to work at this point, but it is still a system we're testing and tweaking and making it work faster and more efficiently. Anything else?
Sorry, how big is your collections database?
How
How many pieces of work?
in our collection?
Yeah.
26,000.